Aloha and welcome. I'm Mayoral Richardson from Hawaii News Now. On August 8th, Oahu voters will have an important decision to make, choosing the next mayor of Honolulu. Are people looking for change, or will it be a familiar face that tries to steer us out of one of the most difficult times in the city's history? We sat down with the 5 leading candidates for a no-holds-barred conversation on why they are the right candidate for the job. Tonight, our interview with businessman Rick Blangiardi. Rick Blangiardi, great to see you. Thank you for coming here.
Thanks, man.
We wanted to jump right into the questions. Why should voters trust you to be the leader to lead us out of this pandemic crisis?
Well, you know, my entire body of work and my whole life has been about putting other people first, starting with my family, my employees, various stakeholders. I don't perceive, in my running for office as an individual experience. I mean, I have enough, I think, understanding and humility to realize that it takes a team, and been very good at selecting people, picking people, understanding decision making, and a lot of the transferable skills. So I would tell you that I think I bring a lot to this job.
You know, when you decided to run, the city was in great shape, the economy was booming. Now it's in total crisis, it's chaotic. You're coming in the middle of a crisis that is a threat to the health, safety, and economy of this city. What in your experience, though, has prepared you to deal with a city in turmoil? And what is your plan?
That's a good question, but let me just tell you, Daryl, that I'm not so sure that the city we were necessarily gangbusters. We had tourism record-breaking numbers, we had low unemployment, all of that is true. But we had a lot of major issues involving. I saw a lot of crises, if you will, in homelessness and the rail, and quite honestly, a leadership crisis as far as decision-making and what I perceive to be a real need in the people who lived here. So that said, I think that, what was the question again?
Well, the main thing is looking forward. How do what has prepared you in your past experiences to come into a city in this kind of dire strait?
Yeah, well, I don't think, anybody's ever been here before. I mean, I'll be real honest with you. And I've been in different crises for different reasons at different times. And so leadership during a crisis moment is different, but this is more so than anything we've ever experienced. So I think part of that is having that understanding, and knowing that I'm not going to revert back to an old playbook. It's about, like I said earlier, it's going to be decision making. It's the team, the people we put around us, and what we expect. I mean, I'm very hopeful at finding the smartest thinkers and the smartest doers, but more than anything, people who embrace accountability. But I have no notions about my being the sole person. I'm asking for the responsibility to run the city in this time on a going forward basis, but it's going to take a lot of talented men and women to do it. And so I think more than anything, that ability to collaborate, communicate, delegate, I think are the kinds of skills that are going to help us. It's going to really take a lot of people to make this happen.
Rick, I think I heard you say that decision making, you had some concerns about what has happened at Honolulu Holiday. I assume you mean specifically the Caldwell administration. Where has he fallen short? Where has he made a bad call that you would have done something different?
Well, I've promised civility here, and one of the things that I really liked about going for this job, Chad, is the fact that the mayor is terming out. Right? It's a nonpartisan race. He's terming out, and all of us are up for it. Look, we've stuck with some situations in homelessness that I really felt that could have been done better. There have been other issues that I've really haven't really been too pleased with. I think the whole rail thing has been somewhat of a debacle. I don't know if I want to put all of that on Caldwell or his administration per se, because of the way HART's been set up. But those are some things that have been very, very powerful in my mind from the standpoint of managing the city.
Rick, if you had to say there was one big idea that you have for the city, one big idea voters could connect with your campaign, what would that be?
Well, I'm really convinced that we can do a lot more on homelessness. I think that's a really important part of our community right now. And I come from that with a pretty extensive work effort, if you will, over the last almost 8 to 10 years. I remember sitting down with Governor Abercrombie, so that was well before even Governor Ige stepped in. So I think that compassionate disruption doesn't work. I think that homelessness has become so pervasive in our neighborhoods. People now feel sheltered, they feel threatened by it. And so I really think we need to go back and look at the systemic issues of what causes homelessness, and the facility right now, just in this past epidemic on Ahi Street, right here in Evile, and the ability to house homeless during the COVID crisis, people with symptoms, the relief that provided to the hospitals, et cetera. I think that that's something from the standpoint of who we are and what we could get done, I really want to stay focused on.
So what would you do differently on homelessness that current and former leaders have not? Are you the candidate that's going to end homelessness once and for all?
Well, you know, ending homelessness is sort of the ideal. I'm not so sure. You know, I look at the point in time count, Christine, how they present it, and, you know, we seem to stay pretty constant. That's because people are coming in and coming out. I think we could take a big bite out of the chronic homelessness. And that's going to take collaboration with the private sector, with the state, you know, with a lot of people. But it also speaks to the situation, providing some relief for our hospitals and what the average cost is. 95% of the people that are homeless that are using the hospitals, using the ER, don't need that. And there's a lot of cost-benefit analysis to doing that. So I really think that homelessness is something that, when you consider it from the standpoint of how I would look at it, is a scalable problem. Now, that said, that's dealing with our chronic homeless. And as I said earlier, other people are coming in and out of homeless all the time, which is why it stays somewhat constant, because there's been a lot of progress made. If you talk to the homeless service providers and what they were able to do, and even going back to when we broke up the park at Kaka'ako. But I'm really worried about the amount of homeless people we may see on a going forward basis. And for that, I don't have an answer right now. And that is something that, look, we're 6 months out from getting into the office. There's so much that can happen. If I stop and think, and it's 3 months to the day that we had the shutdown, on how much has happened in 90 days as I've gone on this learning curve to run for office, and how much we're all witnessing and experiencing, and all the unknowns and uncertainty, I worry about what's to come.
Rick, you just mentioned you've been looking at homeless issues for 8 to 10 years.
Yes.
Setting aside what's coming in the next few months, possibly with a lot of unemployment, and people running out of some federal money that's drying up. Set that aside, 8 to 10 years, based on that experience that you've had, what would you do?
Well, I said compassionate disruptions run its course. So we need to really treat these people. I've been a strong believer the sit-line bans are a catalyst to putting people in, but we need to get the institutions set up. So we're already seeing some success at Evil A. It's only been 2 months in operation, and we're getting some success over in Kaneohe, but we need more of those kind of community service places. People need a place to go. Okay, and so we're going to have to really make sure that we do that and provide the necessary resources. That's going to take a reprioritization. And at a time right now where we're not even sure we're going to be budget-wise, that's one of the first things we're going to take a look at. I mean, the first thing will be, and I talked to Christine before a couple weeks ago about the budget, which just got approved at 2.9, and there's less money, and you know, what's that going to look like? I don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months. I mean, they keep saying August is going to be the big month, and they'll be able to tell and what they may or may not do, not on my watch. But when we go in there, and I said this the opening day when I announced I was going to run for mayor, it's something I've done throughout my career. It's where you spend your money and how you set your priorities. And so homelessness will be a priority, and we'll actually do something about that. And we may have to reallocate dollars. I'm just a little bit concerned with how much of a free fall we're going to be in with the loss of tax revenue, which looks to be substantial.
What would you look at cutting then, assuming there is a major loss of tax revenue?
I think, Colin, right now it's really hard to say, but I mean, one of the first things we're going to look at is the waste, okay? And I've been, I haven't looked at that budget yet, to be honest with you. I'm waiting, hopefully, to win a primary, and then I think we'll start to build, if we get by that, to really think in terms of where we are budget-wise. Also, at that point, too, we'll start to see how our city reacts to August and what gets left. So. That would be the first order of business, is to really kind of take a look at what are the numbers we're dealing with. This is, in any endeavor, that's the situation. And so you deal with that reality, and then you go from there.
What specific program, though, do you view as being wasteful?
I don't have a specific program right now that I would say is wasteful. But I would tell you that if I had many times people have said to me, you're going to be amazed at the amount of waste in there. I want to go back in there and I want to look at that. I mean, so again, I'm not trying to talk about something I don't know for certain, but I just know that that exists.
In terms of tax revenues, sorry, Christina, in terms of tax revenues, one of the things that hotels are saying is they've not been able to operate for months.
Right.
And they're saying we really need a property tax break.
Yeah.
Would you, not just pushing it back, but a break? Would you give that to hotels?
Well, you know, that's a big question, right? Because there's a big difference between saying they want to defer their taxes inevitably, or whether or not, as I think the mayor has done, giving them a 4-month term, right? That's a big forgiveness, because if we were to say, no, you don't pay property taxes, then I think that actually got raised and it got killed. I'm not in favor of doing that. These are big multi-international hotels that have been here. They're really working in an extractive business and have been for a long time. And while they serve Hawaii well, there's a lot more I believe they could go back to do in the community. I said yesterday publicly that I would go back to the hotels and negotiate with them. I'd actually want them to make a bigger contribution. And if anybody was, I'm not going to raise property taxes, but if for residents, but if there's anybody we would look at to a form of revenue, it would be the hotels.
Do you feel that by doing that, you can increase the cost of coming to Hawaii for guests? Because a lot of people have talked about, oh, we want to reduce the number of tourists there are here. We want them to spend more money. Do you do that by basically making it more expensive to be a tourist?
Look, we're about to recalibrate tourism in a way that we've never seen before, and it's going to happen almost on a natural basis. All the experts and people I talk to right now say maybe starting August 1 through the end of the year, we'll see 1 million visitors, maybe. We're still not sure. We're getting breakouts that are on the rise on the mainland. We don't know about the willingness of people to travel, even with a test available to them. We'll see. But let's say we get 1 million visitors. Let's say we do that. And this year's number then will come in at around 3 million. But do the math on the next 5 months, okay? You get 1 million is like, let's just, for simple math purposes, 200,000 people a month. Divide that by 30, you're talking 6,000 to 7,000 people a day. I mean, a day coming in here. I'm sorry. Think about that compared to the 30 we had before. And what's that going to look like, in our hotels? How many rooms? Who's even open up for a hotel? We've already lost 25% of our restaurants, with another 25% or so hanging in the balance. That's 750 to 1,500 restaurants. So I'm not interested necessarily that there's a possibility here for a different clientele going forward. Because if you do the projections even over the next couple of years, then I think that it's going to require a different clientele. And I'm on record. I've said, in your publication, we've been wholesaling to the masses for a long time. It has been the almighty dollar. How many planes can fly in here? How many seats are in here? And how many room nights can we fill at the expense, I think, quite honestly, of even the visitor experience, but also especially to our residents. We've subordinated our residents in pursuit of that money. So I'm not worried about the margins of these big hotels. Okay? I am not worried about that.
What about a higher minimum wage for hotels in the hospitality industry?
Well, they're already considerably above the minimum wage level, okay? And I'm really dismayed at the lack of progress we've been able to make, but I understand it now, especially I've been in this role here, because I was a strong advocate for raising the minimum wage, getting people to $15, even $17 an hour. But if you really begin to look at it and think about the impact locally, and the backbone of our community, which is our small businesses, many of them can't really do that. So to me, the alternative is we need to start creating affordable rental units and build to price, because we're not going to be able to bring the salary up to that. We have to really do that. That along, when I talk about homelessness, all of that stuff, it works hand in glove on affordable rental units in the urban core. I believe that there's spaces to do it. I know the developers want to do that. There's a lot of smart money. This is going to be a lot of collaboration. You asked me earlier about what I bring. It's going to take that kind of business thinking and that kind of collaboration and communication. I really think we can do that. We're in a different place here in a mindset because of the impact, and we haven't even begun to feel it yet, the way we're going to feel it. Okay? And so I think there's a chance to do some things that maybe 10 years ago, 20, 30, even 30 years ago, people would have thought, can't happen, won't happen, for all the other reasons. This is what this kind of situation brings about. This is the opportunity, if you will, the silver lining coming out of this crisis to do the things we need to do. And recalibrating tourism is one, building affordable rentals because we absolutely have to is another.
Rick, you mentioned that you haven't read the city budget that just was signed by Mayor Caldwell. So why should voters trust you to run the city if you're not familiar with the city's finances?
Because it's a budget. We've worked with budgets a long time, and I would tell you honestly, I plan to surround myself with some really good people. I'll say that over and over again. Budgets are just a matter of zeros. I've worked with much bigger budgets than I ever had here when I came in Hawaii. That was my first thing I had to do, was recalibrate my thinking. I was in places where $50 million was a rounding error, and here $50 million was the whole market. So, you know, it's that. It's really what's behind the budget and the people and what we're going to have. And again, I don't know what they're going to do. I have no idea what kind of cuts they might make. All the talk that's going about right now just on the pay raises that were negotiated months, if not years ago, and what's going to happen there, if they're going to put a moratorium on that, and what the fallout's going to be, and so on. So I bring a track record of being the guy who was always hired to replace the person who was fired and said, fix it. Okay? Now,
Rick, you mentioned picking the right members of the team,
Yes.
picking the right people, surrounding yourself with the right people.
Right.
Who would you pick as members of your cabinet, your department heads?
I don't know that yet, Maya. I don't. And I will tell you, that's one of the things. I want to try to get by the primary. You know? And I want to also be able to, in all fairness, evaluate who's in there.
But shouldn't you be having these conversations with people already, and these people would be informing your decisions and guiding you?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I would like to have done that, because my notion of what was going to happen in a political campaign and what the reality of COVID brought, those two concepts, social distancing and campaigning, could not have been any more antithetical. And I've only now just started to get out and meet people. Look at this. I'm actually talking to 6 people compared to another Zoom call, okay? So I haven't gotten there yet. I've only had 2 or 3 meetings with real people. Everything has been via Zoom.
In general, though, would you look to the private sector more than people who've already been in government?
Depends on who comes out. I think if we get out, if I'm out there and we're saying I think, look, I know there are a lot of really smart, talented people here, and I really want to take some pride in being able to recruit those people. You know, my biggest concern is their pay. In some cases, if they're going to leave private sector jobs. But with so much at stake for Hawaii, I really think there are a lot of good people, a lot of really smart young people who want to stay here, fight here, who have a lot to offer. And I think I actually changed the trajectory of local politics by being the person I am, not only as an individual and how I operate, but what I represent in the equation on a going forward basis. That's what's at stake right now. Hawaii's future is at stake in a very different way.
Rick, if you're elected, you'll also have to deal with the city council, and you know
Yes.
the council has a long history of infighting. There are 5 open seats. What's your philosophy there? Can you
Well,
get the council on the same page?
You just said it, Colin. I mean, 5 empty seats, 5 new people coming in. What a great opportunity to start building a shared mindset and drop the politics of old, if you will. I don't want to sound naive. I've operated always with people who disagree with me all the time. But you work really hard to build consensus. In this particular case, for the greater good. If we see an exodus out of here next year, as the university is projecting, of 25 to 35,000 people, and while I've actually heard some cynical people say, that's okay, just like the tourists, we didn't need them, I don't come from that place. I used to live here for a long time, moved away. I knew the pain of what it feels like to leave here involuntarily, although I left on a voluntary basis, but to have left Hawaii and wanting to come back. So, you know, my attitude about that is precisely that.
Rick, one of the biggest, maybe the single biggest criticism is coming from Colleen Hanabusa, Mufi Hanneman, Kim Pine. All of them have served in office or are serving.
Yeah.
They can't just come from the business world. You're going to need training wheels. Keith Amamiya, the other top candidate as well, has a business background.
Yeah.
You got to respond to that.
Sure.
They're saying you're not going to be up to the job.
I will respond to that right now, because I actually heard one of them say the other night in a forum that this isn't business, it's government. Okay? And that to me just really, like, that's exactly why I decided to do this, okay? Because somehow that's some sort of inner secret world. Look, the mayor is the CEO of the city. It is about managing people, decision making. I'm going to say it again, having the right people, understanding what it takes to get things done. This is not some inner secret club or whatever, because we're not in that place. Nor do I perceive it that way.
That's exactly, I mean, I kind of agree with you. People should look at government more like a business. However, government is very unique from a business in that you've got a unionized workforce that is unionized all the way up past the supervisor level. And then you've got the most incredible procurement bureaucracy, environmental laws. I'm just wondering, do you have the patience, as a person who's always been a fast mover, do you have the patience to go butt your head up against that bureaucracy?
Well, we're going to have to find that out, because I'm going to tell you the economics are going to dictate that as well.
How do you manage that situation? Can you picture yourself managing it?
Well,
How
I've
do you
worked with a
change
lot
it?
of, look, I've worked with a lot of unions, okay? And there are things that you do and you don't do, but I'm going to say it again, the overriding financials are going to determine some of the things you're talking about, Okay.
Are salaries potentially on the table as something that you would
I
look
think
at cutting?
anything. I think everything is on the table
Okay.
in this situation, and that's the reality check. When people talk about making tough decisions, this is not perpetuation of the status quo. We are going to be in uncharted waters. Whether anybody wants to hear that or not, that's the reality. And that's also the concern. So my plan would be to try to mitigate as much damage versus doing something that seems draconian. It's just the opposite. But we're going to be faced with circumstances they're going to be very painful.
Well, what about SHOPO? That's the police union. They've endorsed you.
Yes.
Would you be able to stand up to them and say, look, guys,
I already
we're facing...
have. I've already come out in favor
You're not
of
in
the bill.
office yet.
Right, but I already have. I got asked what my position was publicly on was it 285? I got so many numbers in my head.
So come the,
transparency.
Yes.
HB 285, the misconduct records,
Right.
right. But that's at the state level. We're talking about, I mean, it applies to all 4 counties.
Right.
But I'm saying if you're facing a budget situation, a severe crisis,
Right.
and I recognize collective bargaining is involved here, but you may have to turn to SHOPO and say, look, I got your endorsement, but I'm afraid we're going to have to look at, I don't know, a 10% cut across the
No,
board.
I have a different attitude towards that, Chad, on the first responders, because I think the safety of the people of this state is really important, of our city, of our island especially. And so while there's nobody who's in a protected class, they're already understaffed some 300 plus jobs. And given everything that's going on, I think it's getting even more increasingly difficult to even recruit, which is part of the reason why they're under. And so I would tell you that I would look at first responders last because of what it means
So
for
it is
the
kind of a
well-being of
sacred
people.
cow.
I wouldn't say it's a sacred cow. Nothing's sacred.
And let me just get you on the record.
Nothing is sacred and nobody's
Got it.
safe,
Let me
okay?
just get you on the record. When it comes to police misconduct records, you would be in favor of releasing the names of those officers who have been suspended or been fired and making that public, which is the opposite of what SHOPO wants.
Yo, I'm already on record of saying that. I called Malcolm about that. I was in this room, in this office with Louis Kealoha demanding that. So I'm not going to be duplicitous about that. I was surprised they endorsed me. I went in there taking a lot of heat for the actions of this newsroom towards the police department. And I stood my ground, okay? And they endorsed me, to my surprise.
You know,
All right?
one thing though is that's a very important reform, but also there's other reforms being talked about.
Actually,
in
by the
life-
way, can I
Oh,
just say
sorry.
one thing?
Please.
Dismissed police officers get reported. It's just a misconduct.
Well, it's
Is it-
often
is
very
it?
difficult to get records about fired police officers,
Really?
even though they're supposed to be
Okay, well,
public.
see, I haven't been doing your job, but my understanding was on the books that the only thing that they were keeping back was the misconduct.
The only thing that's really clear is that the police officers are the only government employees that have this exemption
Okay.
of revealing their names
All right.
involving misconduct.
All right, so
The only ones.
so here's what I think, okay? I think my overall tenet of my administration, first and foremost, is going to build trust. And you have to have transparency to have trust. And in today's world order, not just because of what's happened on the mainland, but even here, and especially given the circumstances we're going to be under, which is not going to be easy to do, you know, you can't have something like that. So it may not be what they want to hear, but I believe in that, and I believe Caldwell has already come out in favor
He is
of
in
the
favor.
legislation, right? So he understands it. I understand it.
Okay.
Rick, I wanted to get to something that Chad had mentioned, and some of your opponents have said they don't need training wheels
Yeah.
for the job of mayor. Do you need training wheels?
Well, first of all, I find that term very condescending, okay, if not arrogant. And I don't think any of these other people have ever been asked before if they needed training wheels to do their jobs. Okay, so I've done some big jobs in my life. Is there a learning curve? Absolutely. Do they have a learning curve? Absolutely. You think any one of them has even been in a situation like this before? None of them have really even run anything. I've run big organizations, complex organizations, tough situations, turning things around, as I said earlier. My problem is I don't talk in singular pronouns. That's my problem. And what I'm learning early on in political office, they do, okay? So, you know, we're in a place where this is not deja vu, all right?
I don't get that reference, singular, you don't talk in singular.
I don't say
pronouns.
I, okay?
I think you did just say that you don't need training wheels.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess, Rick, I think what voters are going to want to know is they know that you've led a large organization very successfully, but what homework have you done that prepares you for the job of mayor, you know, with the specific constraints that that job has?
Well, we're doing homework every single day, Christine. We've had all kinds of discussions on and learning policy positions on the homeless and what may be possible on rail, which we haven't got to yet, I'm sure, which is a big moving target. As recently as today, they just deferred now to August 27th on the P3. This is a changing landscape. So when you talk about homework, when these shifting sands, it is hard. As I said earlier, we're not even going to be in office for 6 months, and the worst of this, from the standpoint of how it impacts us, hasn't happened yet. So my fear is it's not about not learning something. I don't want to be in a position where we make statements about what we're going to do that don't hold up.
But why should voters choose you over someone who's more well-versed in the issues?
Are they more well-versed in the issues?
People that have, served on government boards before.
I would say to you, what's their track record for getting things done? Okay, that's what I would say to you. I've gotten things done everywhere and anywhere I've been. My work in broadcast over the last 43 years has only been part of what I've done. I've worked extensively here. This newsroom has afforded me a real lens on this community, but I've also worked diligently in this community out there. So there's not like there's some secret club and some secret mystery here. We want to take things head on, and I think that's part of what has to happen.
Rick, if you're elected, you're going to have to work pretty closely with the state.
Yes.
You might not want to talk about the details, but maybe just give us a big picture philosophy of how you'd work with Governor Ige. What's your relationship like with the governor, and what would be your philosophy working with the state moving forward?
Look, we talk about collaboration. If I'm fortunate enough to get elected, it's you make that trip over, and I recognize who the governor is and what the governor represents. So you start to work in a collaborative way. Colin, that's exactly what we don't want to have, is this sort of positioning, if you will, this sort of silos, and I'm here and you're. This is going to take all of us. It's going to take not only the state and the city working together and winning, hopefully having a city council that understands that, but this is also involving the private sector, winning trust with the people who live here, getting understanding. There's going to be a lot that's going to happen that way. So I think it's about collaborating and not getting territorial and communicating. And if where the cameras are rolling, I'll tell you, it's about having the right heart for this job. Okay, I've got the leadership experience. I've got the capabilities mentally here on what it takes to do. But I think there's another dimension about the caring that goes on and what's at stake.
Do you have any ideas on how to rebuild the economy, create new jobs, new sectors to target?
Yeah, that's the number one thing, right? So when we announced we're going to run for mayor, the talking points I thought were going to be on homelessness and rail, because we'd done enough extensive research, but clearly things like neighborhood crime, infrastructure, elder care, classic talking points in the city, and now COVID happens, right? So the rebuild of the economy is an enormous thing that nobody in the field has ever done before, right? Yet I'm being asked. So I also know through the work we've done in broadcast over all the years, have a lot of respect for small businesses. And we've initiated a lot of small business programs over the year to give them the light of day, to create awareness and whatever. In this particular case, I think the first thing I'm going to do is, we're going to have to find out who's surviving. Because a lot of people are saying they've either closed their doors forever, they're about to close their doors forever, what are we out there? So the first thing is we try to do is help these people understand and get the maximum amount of money we can get from the city's P3 money or the PPP money that was allocated, okay? And I think the second thing is to help them become operational from the standpoint of any PPE that they need or anything else that they need to allow them to do business. And then I think the last thing would be to really try to help them navigate through the federal monies. And I think we're going to have to be that kind of a resource and providing that kind of outreach. So many businesses in this town are families run, or they employ 20 or fewer people, and they're really at risk. And so we're going to have to really be in that kind of helping relationship in every way we can.
Rick, on that point, you do kind of have the luxury of being able to run as a blank slate, looking forward. So one way of analyzing how you think about issues is to look back a little bit.
Yep.
So on the COVID thing, when the mayor put out his first orders shutting things down,
Right.
shut down any business that was non-essential.
Right.
Many of those were small businesses that only sold one or two products out of their stores, and they're done. Many of those will never come back, partly because they were shut down immediately and then were closed for the longest
And
period of time.
many, Darryl, forgive me, many also were depending on state contracts. A lot of those smaller
And then
businesses.
meanwhile, these big box stores, the Walmarts and
Right.
so on, were able to operate selling the same products that those poor small business people were selling. So do you think that the orders that came out at the initial COVID crisis were overbroad and too damaging to the economy? Would you maybe have done that a little differently?
Yeah, I think I would have. It's hard to, one thing I don't want to do is second guessing, and now we're going back in time here, okay? I was a little bit despondent over the communication that was coming out because it was all over the place, from the governor's office to the mayor's office, and people seemingly jockeying for leadership positions and miscommunicating. And I know just through the work we've done here in broadcast, when we're in crisis, you're providing information. It's really important, especially information that could possibly save people's lives. But back to your question. I went to supermarkets, and I went to Walmart. I went to different places. I even was in the Capuna line at Costco.
I'm having a hard time picturing you at Walmart, but keep going.
Okay, I did. And even though in some cases we had social distancing walking in, once you walked through the doors, that was all over with, okay? And so I really thought, gee whiz, this essential business thing here is a bit of a shibai. And so I really felt that, I understood when we locked down in March. I understood it absolutely. And when we hit the third week of April and they said we're going to close till May 31st, I thought, wow, because I was already hearing from people in businesses or whatever that this was breaking their backs. This was going to be really hard. And that seemed to me to be an overreach, okay? And so I really thought at that time that, we lost perspective on good public health and a stable economy. Right? And everything was going to be on the side of good public health with no accountability towards a stable economy, understanding the businesses that are out there. And that just has gotten extended upon extended. I've understood, I've supported the governor's decision on what we've done with tourism, even though that is significant, okay? But I thought we could have got other smaller local businesses, given the commerce of this place, back. And there seemed to be no willingness to do that. And I thought that was punishing.
Rick, you mentioned shopping in the lines at Walmart. You've had a very lucrative and successful career in television. So what makes you able to understand the problems of a multi-generational family that's working multiple jobs to make ends meet?
Well, let me tell you something about my life, Mahey, that you don't know. I grew up in a bilingual household in a tenement. My mother was the youngest of 9. My father was the oldest of 7 immigrant families. We didn't even have a bathroom in my house at the age of 12. Okay, those are my roots. And then I was the first in my family to go to college. And not only that, I was really proud of that. But then I got into a business called football coaching, which was my passion of what I wanted to do. And I wasn't making any money. I worked at that. got to be the associate head football coach at the University of Hawaii and defensive coordinator, which in coaching parlance was, I had a good career going before the age of 30. And we worked really hard. I had a baby coming. I was making $15,000 a year, despite having a master's degree. So I got into television because CSFTEL told me if I was willing to work hard, in 3 years I could make $50,000 a year. And at that time, Larry Price was the head coach. He was making $25,000. And for the first time, somebody told me you could make double what the head coach was making, because all through college and everything else, and I worked my way through school, I never thought about making money because I was in a business at that time it just didn't pay well. I left coaching I was making $15,000 a year. Nick Rolovich just left for $15 million. It was a difference in 40 years. I've never forgotten who I am, okay? And I got into this business to take care of my family, which was what most jobs were going to be about. I mentioned that earlier. I've always been putting other people first. And so I worked hard and built success against the odds year after year, setting after setting. I've never forgotten who I am.
You mentioned CSFTEL, and it reminded me of something. He ran for governor as a self-made person, and he basically, one of his problems running for governor was this widespread perception that he was buying the election. Are you doing that, or are you financed outside? Or how are you financing this?
Well, it's been the most incredible time to raise money to run for office. I mean, I'll be honest with you. There are people that I wouldn't ask for money because I know that they're carrying their own employees. I've had business associates in town. So, I'm self-funding to the extent that I can, but I will tell you we're far from buying the election. There's a lot of things. I mean, I'm trying to, you said earlier, I'm glad you brought that up, Darryl. I'm just trying to win in the primary. That's the first thing, okay? There's got to be 2 of us. So you know, we haven't had the most financial resources, but we're doing okay. We're trying to put it out there, but it's anything but buying an election.
Rick, what single action do you think would most improve the lives of Honolulu's families and future generations?
Well, it's a great question. What single action? I wish there was a single action.
Or one area
One
that
area.
you would focus
Well,
on?
I actually think that if we can, I'm going to go back to homelessness. I think it's, despite the fact it's a fraction of 1% of our state's population, we've done enough research, even when I was here, but even since then, on what's top of mind, even during COVID-19. And so, you know, to me, it's tied to our root culture. It's about compassion and taking care of that. But it's actually spread because we've got a little bit of a different composition now. The chronic homeless have become a danger to a lot of people. And so I think that if we could, if we did that combined with having affordable rentals, really doing that, and building to a different AMI, and making it feasible for people to stay. You know, a couple of years ago, Hawaii Business did an article that for the first time in our state's history, people who were born here, and this is true of 2 of my 3 children, who were alive living elsewhere, rivaled the in-state population. That, you know, and I'm not suggesting we could have 2.8 million people here, I'm not saying that at all, but it's that whole thing of feeling like I can't make it here and I've got to leave, or having homelessness in people's faces to remind them, you know, you're familiar with the Alice report, how fragile things are, 1 out of 2 people, and I think that number is going to increase for that 50% to a higher number. Right. So I would tell you there's no one thing here. I think we're going to have to be open to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial ideas, new thinking. I'm not going to go down that diversifying our economy lane in any kind of rhetoric. I've looked at, you asked me what I've been learning over this time. You listen to it, you can read what every governor has said over the last 50 years about diversifying the economy and what's really happened. But I do think there's a lot of entrepreneurial ideas out there. But I said, you know, I'm building in our construction and our ag and certainly in our energy sector, we have an opportunity to do some things that are, you know, that we need to do. So I think it's understanding who we are, if we're going to bring it to one, and then doing the things that facilitate that, you know. So whether it's being really progressive, if you will, in our thinking on job creation.
Well, back to the housing piece for one moment. You know, we hear all the time we need to address the homelessness, we need to increase affordable housing. Politicians say this, you know, ad nauseum. But what exactly is your plan to do that? What are you going to do differently?
Okay. You know, the affordable housing, the notion of affordable housing has kind of lost, the word affordability to me has sort of lost its meaning, okay? Because if you look at what the rental incomes are and what people make, and this is why you don't have one job is enough and whatever. So look, when I first came back to go to graduate school in '71, I lived in a little cement building, 3 steps walk up kind of a thing. I don't know when they stopped making those. I haven't seen one of those built in a long time. We're going to just have to take a look at what we can actually build.
But
Not
do
to
you have
remove
a plan
homelessness.
to address it?
Do I have a specific plan right now on a housing plan? I think we'll develop that. I think I can tell you right now that I think that that there are developers who really want to build that way. There are incentives that could happen that way, and I think we're going to design that.
Rick, you know, we've seen the Mauna Kea movement spark conflict and protests across the state and over city projects. What would you tell those nervous developers who have said, I have followed the law, we've gotten the approval from government, police who feel that they've made to look out like the bad guys, and Native Hawaiians who are willing to risk their lives and be arrested for their beliefs? What would you tell those 3 groups?
Well, what is the question specifically?
The question specifically is, what would you say to those 3 groups if you were in the middle of a conflict over a city project?
Well, I think we need to be community-based, first of all. I signed the pledge agreement to protect Sherwood Forest. It had nothing to do, Kahuku was already done, it had nothing to do with it was not a voice I could have as a candidate. But I went out there, I walked around the grounds, I met with people, I went to Waimanalo town hall meeting, town center at the school, drove all through the valley. I'd never even been back in the back of Waimanalo before. I think it's about, we need to communicate. I think we've got a responsibility to our residents. So I think it's really about whether you listen to hear, whether you listen to speak. I've learned to listen to hear and do what's practical. So I think, look, if I were to say it this way, we have a lot of fear and uncertainty now. That's only going to be exacerbated on a going forward basis. So to project that into office, if you will, with a fearful people, like you just said, a concerned people, if the first order of business through our actions would be to create hope, then my end game would be, by the time I left office, would be to leave a confident people. That's going to come from integrity. It's going to come from doing right by a community, by just treating people who live here as if they have a voice in what you're doing.
Rick, you know, many Native Hawaiians have been angered by your support of the 30-meter telescope project. It is a state project, but they are angry at you because of that stance. Why should they change their minds about you?
You know, we took a position on getting the workers back up at Keck. We were aggressive about, because we really felt that those were local people there that needed to get back to work, and it was hurting the planet. When this shifted to what it became on the sovereignty issues, we became very respectful, and my voice then was not anywhere as vocal. If we were advocates, just to be clear, because I've talked to a number of Hawaiian people, if we were advocates on anything, it was about getting the workers back up at Keck, because that was responsible and the right thing to do. And that's what that is. And if people, I will tell you what's at the root of that, to be really perfectly honest, because so much of our advertising here came, the TMT chose Hawaii News Now to advertise on because of the strength of this newsroom. That because we put the advertising here, I got associated with it that way.
But on the flip side, if you look at the developers' side, they feel that they have followed the law and they have followed all of these processes. So others have criticized government for not being swift and decisive when it comes to these projects.
So you talk about the developers up at, we're going to talk about TMT?
All developers who are now saying government is not moving fast enough, they're not making swift and decisive decisions,
Right.
and they are coddling people who are willing to stand in front of the project.
There's a worry that a developer has an idea for something that's going to be important. Think solar energy. Right now, Hawaiian Electric is moving forward with awarding these projects, you know, to have solar to be really get things moving. But the concern is what happens if a developer has met all those obligations to build the project, and then
Right.
along comes a group, perhaps it's a Native Hawaiian group, who says you can't build this here, you can't build this there. What are you going to do with that?
Well, I think, and I want to go back to what Christine asked me about the plan, because my plan is centered around DPP and what we need to do there, okay? The Department of Planning and Permitting. To that end, you know, that's going to be hard to project. You know, I'm all for people's ability to protest, but this, again, when you're community-based, it should be done ahead of time. There's a matter of building trust and whatever. And we'd have to just see what that situation is. I've not seen that involving solar with people protesting saying you can't build that here yet.
Well, look at Kahuku, look at the wind turbines.
Yeah,
there
well,
was something where the people in
Right.
those neighborhoods felt they were not being listened to.
Right.
And in fact, it was the police that had to come in and enforce that and make sure that the equipment got up there to build those things.
Yeah.
But the folks up there in Kahuku asked them, a lot of them felt like, you didn't listen to us.
Right.
Changes.
I didn't have that. I didn't have anything to do with that. I would not let that happen. In fact, I was surprised that they moved all of that to places where people didn't even think. I don't know how something like that happened, Chad. I'm going to say it again. I'm getting in this. You asked me earlier. You would have wanted to ask me about how I perceive things. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that shouldn't really be happening. Now, you can't always please everybody, but it seemed to me like there was more than a breakdown there on what happened. I'm sorry.
Just to be clear, you're saying that you would not have
I think-
arrested people in order to have the wind farm get up there?
I think that part of the complaints coming out from Kahuku had a lot to do with the fact that the big windmills, which were noisy and everything, got put in places they didn't know where it was going to be. It was different than what they thought.
Well, the
Okay?
industrialization of a rural neighborhood, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's part of it. We're going to need wind power as part of our future, though, and anybody who's involved with that will tell you that on the Home Clean Energy Initiative. But, you know, whether it was a lack of transparency or deception, I don't know. I wasn't involved in that. I watched our stories that we covered here on that, but there was something there that really broke down. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. You know,
we do
look,
need to shift over to rail a little bit, because we want to make sure we have enough time to do that.
yeah, I just want to make sure. Hey, you had another question?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She was telling me, rail. So,
Okay, I'm sorry.
So, you know, the whole rail project right now is depending on what you mentioned earlier, the 3P, the private part public-private partnership.
Right.
And they're counting on a consortium of companies coming together in order to build the last segment and then run it for 30 years, hopefully take the risk out of the project. They just moved it back again. Do you feel confident that that's going to come through? And if it doesn't, what's plan B for you? If that P3 doesn't work, what's plan B?
Well, I'm not confident it's going to come through, okay? And we're waiting like everybody else. It's getting pushed off to August 27th. They seem to be, I've not had a conversation with anybody to date. That will definitely be a key, but then it becomes at what cost? Nobody knows the details. So and like anything, it's almost like venture capital. I would not be prepared to want to sell off a whole lot of the city to do that necessarily. So let me be really clear about a couple of things.
The other day, you were jumping on another candidate's position because you said, "Oh, I'm going to move. I want to build it all the way to Ala Moana."
That's right. I'm going to come to that right now.
Well, but you said that it would increase property taxes to record levels, but nobody is supporting using property tax to pay for rail. I'm wondering who told you that that would happen?
Well, because how else are you going to pay for it? See, I turned around and I asked them, do you think you're going to get more money from the feds? We're going to get more money from the feds to do that, which is what I've heard people saying that, because else where's it going to come? You're going to have a real depression in your GET and in your hotel room tax, which actually has a lot to do with the construction of the rail. So if you're going to say build it to Ala Moana, let's just be feasible and let's be real, okay? And I was always an advocate for building the rail to completion. COVID-19, there's a pre and a post. COVID-19 is a wake-up call. So if you're going to say we're going to build it to Ala Moana, you already know, first of all, we don't even know what the bid is going to come in at. The $1.4 billion for the last 4.1 miles is tied to P3, provided the bids. What if it's even a bigger number? How does that get paid for? And if they're going to pay that, okay, at what price do we have to give up the city? So my point is, you're going to have less revenue. There's been already the model to fund this thing from the general excise tax and the room tax, okay? And so if you're not going to raise property taxes, you're going to go to the feds. You're going to go to the feds and you're going to say, we need more money for a project that's billions of dollars over budget, that's years behind in the making, that's under investigation for corruption and other things. You think that's a likely source of money? So where is it going to come from under these circumstances?
You're the guy that's running for mayor. Tell us.
Well, I think, I'm not going to raise property taxes. So then we have a whole different mindset about where we are with rail and what we're going to do about it. Are there alternatives or whatever? Look, it's not desirable to stop it at Mission Street if you listen to all the analysts about ridership and everything else, okay? That's not a desirable conclusion. But there's a lot of things we're about to face that are not desirable.
So what do you do about it?
Well, you're asking me what is the call? If we
So in
can't,
that
if we
situation,
can't
how
build
do
it,
you-
we make the call, we stop it. Just like I'm going to tell you, if I can't pay you, you don't have a job anymore. You know?
Stop it or stall it?
Well, I said earlier, I'd probably stop. This is a 100-year project. Do you remember how it got sold? It's a 100-year project. This was going to be the link between Honolulu and the building of a second city. All right? So if you've got to take a time out because of a global pandemic that's unprecedented in our history, that's going to cause pain and suffering for the common person working who's already under hardship, okay? What is wrong with that if you have to do that and then maybe you come back another point in time? You know, because who's going to pay for it? It's not going to get paid. And if these guys are going to come in and let's say it's $2 billion or slightly more. I've heard projections all the way up, it could be a $15 billion. And they're going to say, we'll take this as if there was even a P3, at what price would they take that? What would we have to give them?
Let me understand. I'm sorry to monopolize our side of the table for
No.
a moment, but if the main financing mechanism for the rail has been the excise tax and now the TAT entirely, right? A good portion of the excise tax comes from the visitor industry. Obviously, the TAT is entirely from the visitor industry. If the visitor industry comes back in 3 or 4 years, those taxes will be back again. And what I'm hearing you say is maybe you'd stall until that starts happening?
That's what I said, yes.
Okay,
That's
all
what
right,
I said. That's what I meant by
understand.
stall. It's a 100-year project. We may not be able to go forward with it now. Just like the hotel worker who's going to lose their job because the hotel has got 1/5 of the attendants in there. There's nothing. If you can't pay for something, you can't pay for it. And it's a notion of. That's why I said you're going to raise the property taxes. The comment that was made was, "We'll sharpen our pencils." Are you kidding me? On that project, Where's it going to come from? You've got to be, look, maybe I'm just too grounded in reality, but that's who I am. Okay?
But you say you haven't met with Hart? Have you?
No, I passed Robbins in a hallway. No, I'm waiting to see if they're going to. I was all set to meet with them after July 23rd. You know, I wanted to, like we would all find out. Even then, I think when the announcement comes out, I'm not sure when it would be awarded. But no, we haven't done that yet. And
we wanted to just shift gears a little bit. We wanted you to explain one of the most difficult periods of your life, and how have you gotten yourself out of it?
wow. All I've done all my whole life is work hard against the odds, Mayor. I mean, there were different times and different chapters in my life that were more difficult than others. I've always believed in just having integrity, work hard, stay on, be honest. I mean, integrity and honesty are a little bit different in my mind from the standpoint of who I've been on a consistent basis.
Can you share a specific story?
Of real hardship.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was from a financial standpoint, I guess, or maybe from a career standpoint. I left coaching. I didn't want to leave coaching. It was really hard for me. I was doing really well. I was born to be a college football coach. I have every confidence. If I had stayed then, I would have been a head coach, at some point. I just was really comfortable in that. But I couldn't afford it to stay in it. And so I took a job I knew nothing about. This is how I got into a broadcast career. Friends of mine who had left coaching had said, don't go sell insurance, you'll hate it. Don't sell sporting goods, you'll hate it. I literally backed into a media job. I really had no game plan for it, despite the fact I already had a master's degree. I was so programmed I was going to go do that. So I changed my life's direction, and that wasn't easy. And they didn't exactly roll over and make room for me at KGMB in those days. That was a dominant television station. So it was out of that. And quite honestly, in the beginning, I even felt sorry for myself for a while. I didn't walk into it feeling really good about it. I was doing it out of duress. It's a tough chapter, and I had a baby coming. So that was a turning point for me. That was a major turning point. And since then, there's been ups and downs in my life. It's not been easy.
Rick, reflecting back on your career, when was the last time you changed your mind about something really important?
That's a great question, Colin. I've changed my mind about something important. Because I can tell you I changed my mind a lot of times working here because we try to stay fluid, and something really important. It changed my mind. It changed my life. I left a job that I loved doing each and every day with people I really cared about in a place that I really felt we were making a contribution to go and do this, okay? I went from being on top of my game to being, questioned by people that I never used to get questioned by, okay? To being criticized about stuff, to having people say it. So I would tell you, I changed my mind to do this because I felt inspired that I could provide the kind of leadership for a place that I love. I fell in love with Hawaii 55 years ago as a young person. The thing that's been amazing for me, it's loved me back. And so this is about that. And I'll tell you right now, the real driver in this whole thing, and you've already alluded to it a couple of times, felt a real sense of responsibility. We all live here. We all have concerns. When you work in a newsroom, in a news setting, maybe even feel it a little bit more, because through the lens of this place, you see a lot, and plus my own work. What I learned is that you can feel that responsibility no matter what leverage we tried to bring to bear. I had no authority. I had no authority. This is about getting authority to make decisions, to make things happen. And no, I don't have a plan for everything right now, but we will. But I know how to put plans together and how to execute. And so that's what I would tell you what this is about right now. And I like the fact that the job is open. I don't have to bash the incumbent, or Kirk, if you will. And it's about getting us through this. And for me, this will be I'm not building a political career, okay? I'm not. I'm going to go into this job with everything I have, and I've had nothing but success in my whole life, and I know what drives that success, and that's going to be my approach to this job.
You know, a lot of my students at UH, and I talk to them every day, they don't see a future for themselves in this city. What would you say to them to convince them to stay and raise their own families?
I talk to young people all the time, and I tell them, we need you. You have to stay here, but we've got to give them a reason to do that, right? So that's going to be really hard. You know, as I said earlier, I'm not indifferent about people leaving. I feel bad. I feel really badly. In fact, somebody said to me, just so you know, the housing thing, well, if all those people leave, we'll have housing available. I thought, it's not the way I want to look at life, you know? But maybe there's something to that. You know, maybe that'll, but we don't want that to happen. So we don't want young people to leave. 2 of my 3 kids don't live here. They'll never live here. They were all born here, you know? So I think it's going to be more on the entrepreneurial front, but I also think we could do some things in ag and in energy that are pretty sexy, and construction's a great trade. And for that matter, when you asked me earlier about the police, you know, I'm hoping we can get better staffing, much less police, because we got 300 plus openings, and that's not an ideal. Not even for the men and women who are serving in the police department. There's a lot of strain to that to try to cover what has to be covered. So I think it's going to have to be through our actions. It's setting a different tone. Look, I'm a real big believer in leadership and the difference a leader can make. Okay? And I like to think that even at City Hall right now, we're not saying everybody's got to go out. There's some probably really good people there. There are a lot of really good people when we moved in here, and they had, and I know what we created over the course of time. So that's what's different. I'll tell you this, and I'll say it very clearly. I am different than any of the other candidates, and I'm different than the guy who's in that office right now, and that's what's on the table. And it's my life's work and my passion for Hawaii and my caring with no other agenda. And I'm not going to be compromised because I don't seek anything else in public office. That's who I am. That's the integrity I'll bring to this. And what I don't know, I can learn. And what I don't know and I can't learn, I'll find people who do. Because that's no different than even in this situation or other ones I've been in. Surround myself with a lot of really smart people who get the job done.
Rick, what is your favorite song and why?
My favorite song and why?
What a shift.
God. How about It's Too Late to Turn Back Now by the... Huh? How about that? Yeah, by the Cornelius Brothers and Sister Rose. Yeah. Had those thoughts, I tell you.
I believe.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that choice because when you started this campaign, I'm sure you had a completely different idea of what it would be like. What have been your big disappointments in what has actually transpired when it comes to your ability to get into office, to run for office?
The disappointments have just mostly been I wanted to get out there. You know, you're talking a couple different scenarios about meeting people, you know, talking with different people who might have been upset with me, or just going into community and hearing. I actually said that at the day I announced at the old Stadium Park. I wanted to get out to all parts of the island. We've been precluded from doing that. That's been for me. To me, it's a really human deal here. This is really organic. I mean, you know, that's been a bit of a frustration, you know. And you always see so many people on a Zoom, or you'll hear something like you just said, and what can I do? I can't even defend myself. You know, I can't even say anything. I can't even have a rational conversation. Let's say I wasn't even trying to defend myself, but just have a meeting of the minds. You're not even precluded from doing that. In today's world in social media, you're almost defenseless. People can say whatever they want to say. You can't respond to all of that.
Rick, is there something that you know you're likely to fail at as mayor? Something that about the job you already know is not your strong suit?
That's a great question. You guys are full of good questions today. I said I was going to come in here and pull a Bill Belichick and just say, no, I don't like that question. You know, next, yeah. You know, fear has always been my greatest motivator. I don't want to fail. And I would tell you what I feel right now in this campaign is the people it's all volunteers, I don't have any paid staff, is not letting anybody down. Or for those people who tell me, Rick, I'm pulling for you, I want you to be, I don't want to disappoint. And so I don't want to fail. And you know what, I'm the first to admit when I don't know something. That humility has served me well. I've never claimed to be the smartest crayon on the box, ever. But I've had a gift, if you will, of being able to pick really good people and work with them and understand what they bring to it. So if I were to tell you, kind of always talked about this a little bit, I've managed 3 kinds of capital. Capital has always been on money, the money we're talking about, a budget. That part's a byproduct of having a great organization. The part that's always been intriguing and where it's really made the difference is the human capital, the people whom we pick, the men and women who come to work, but then being able to work effectively with their primary derivative, which is their intellectual capital, and how you embrace those ideas.
Finally, what are 3 words that the next generation will use to describe you? Just 3 words.
Could be 3 adjectives, it could be one thing.
3
you know,
words.
got things done. Decisive, fair, tough-minded.
Rick Blangiardi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.